Hey everyone, welcome into the very first episode of Auburn Anonymous. I am Miles SB. You can find me on X or Twitter as I still call it, at SB Miles. And I'm joined here by my co-host, Mr. Michael SB. Michael, introduce yourself to the world.
What's up, everyone? My name is Michael SB. You can find me on X, currently at Peyton Thorne AA, but that might change here pretty soon.
Yeah, I would think it would. But Michael, the revolutionary thing that I am seeing here is this is an Auburn podcast, and you're on here. I've seen people on Twitter. I mean, I've seen tens upon hundreds of people accusing you of being an Alabama fan. Do you want to put those rumors to rest? Are you actually an Alabama fan?
Yeah, that got started back when Miles Kelly, the transfer who committed to Oklahoma. I put out a prediction for him to go to Auburn, and a lot of people thought I was trolling, and I really do believe he would have went to Auburn, looking back on it, if we really prioritized him. But I mean, at Oklahoma, he's going to be one of their star players, and at Auburn, looking back on it now, I mean, I don't really see him getting much playing time at all, if any. And so I think he made a great decision. And yeah, I was wrong. I'm glad I was. We ended up picking up Miles Kelly instead. And that was one of my few misses. So
Yeah, a lot of people don't know it, but I know you. You know, since you're my brother and all, you have a lot of recruiting connections with Auburn University and other places. But you talked about it, and I believe it was around the last recruiting cycle. You said, "Okay, I'm going to start putting my predictions, some of those online, because you have those connections, and you got so many of them accurate." Favar Edwin, I probably butchered that name. I'm not good at it, but like that, for example, you called that before anyone else. And then plenty of these basketball games I saw you predict and recruits. I mean, you're putting predictions out there before anyone else, and you were right a lot. But just like anyone, you were wrong a few times, and people were quick to hop on it, hop on you for it. But
yeah, and while we're at it, today's currently Monday, November 11th. Tomorrow, November 12th, we're getting a commit tomorrow from point guard Caden Magwood out of Charlotte, North Carolina, top 50 player.
Okay, well, hey, that's news to me. I did not see that coming. So Auburn fans, be excited. We have another top point guard talent coming in. Embarrassment of riches, because and we're going to get into it later, but we looked embarrassingly good at point guard this past week to start college basketball. But before we get into the more fun news, which is basketball for Auburn right now, we're going to talk about something that's not quite as good, and it's this football season. Michael, I'll let you kind of start on this one. How did you see before this season started? Because we're starting this podcast kind of in the middle of November. To start the season, where did you see Auburn going, and why is the season going differently than you saw it going originally?
If you told me gun to the head before the season started, what is Auburn's record going to be, I would have given you 9-3. I personally should have expected what Peyton Thorne has done here. I probably should have seen that coming. I optimistically thought we'd see some improvement as he was a fifth-year senior. I believe he led the SEC in passing yards, career passing yards going into the season. So I expected somewhat of improvement from him. We've gotten pretty good running back play, honestly, with the offensive line that we have. I think we have a pretty average offensive line. I would love to see some of those guys come back next year. I know Jeremiah Wright is a big possibility of coming back next year, and Dylan Wade are two guys that still have eligibility. But was expecting more of that quarterback room. The receiver room hasn't been disappointing. I would have liked to see a little bit more production from the freshmen, but I mean, again, they're freshmen, and you really can't expect too much out of them. And I'm expecting more of them next year, though, and it all comes, and you can't really blame them with Peyton Thorne as your quarterback. I mean, what are you going to do? And that's why Keandre Lambert-Smith, I mean, he's an NFL receiver. Just solely with the stats he's been able to put up with Peyton Thorne as his quarterback should be enough to get him to the NFL.
Oh, yeah, he should be a first rounder.
But overall, I think the problem's been, number one, Peyton Thorne at quarterback. Two, we've made a bunch of horrible coaching decisions this year. I think, looking back on it, we should have won the Missouri game. We blew the lead. We should have won the Oklahoma game. We blew the lead. We should have won, honestly, the California and the Arkansas game. And just Peyton Thorne, coaching hasn't been great. So I think at the end of the season, there's got to be some changes made. I'm expecting there to be, especially on the offensive end, not as much the defensive end. And we got to have an 8-4, 9-3 next year at best.
At a minimum.
I mean, at worst.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So, yeah, I was maybe even slightly more optimistic than you. Like, I told people I knew that this Auburn team, they're going to make a push for the playoff. I said that going into the Alabama game this year, it would be if we won that game, we were in the playoff. That was what I told everyone before the season. And now it very well may be, and it would be best case if we win that game, we're making a bowl game. So quite differently than what I originally said. And I think my diagnosis would be very similar to yours. Peyton Thorne is a lot of the problem. He's regressed since his first year where he was starting at Michigan State, and him and Kenneth Walker were killing it. Partly, is due to him having not as good wide receivers as he had over there. Auburn has great wide receiver talent, but as you said, it's very, very young and has a lot of development. And his receiving room at Michigan State his first year was stacked. So that's been a big thing, but I think he gets overly blamed. The Cal game was awful. Other than that, he hasn't done a horrible job of turning it over. Hasn't been great, and he's definitely made very poor decisions, but he's a lot to blame, and as you said, coaching. And I'll be honest as well, after that Missouri game, I was sitting there thinking, Hugh Freeze does not need to be our coach anymore. I mean, that was my knee-jerk reaction. But now that I've stepped back and kind of looked at it, and I've seen the recruiting class we have coming in, and the recruits we have set up for down the line, you got to keep rolling with Freeze. And as you said, the record's got to get better next year, or else we got to find someone new. But I feel very confident with this recruiting class that he has coming in, and his track record of rebuilding programs at Ole Miss, Liberty, and in the Blindside movie. I feel very good he's going to be able to do that at Auburn.
Yeah, if he's able to keep together this current recruiting class, I know we're going to lose a couple. We lost that 3-star today, which wasn't. We're going to replace them with someone better. We lost a 3-star today. There's another corner who's most likely going to transfer. But besides that, if he can keep the best players in this recruiting class, especially Deuce Knight, to be specific, keep him in the class. Keep these Freeze 4 receivers in the class, or not in the class, but that are already on the team. And just bring back all these defensive players who are getting minutes right now and keep the recruiting class together and, see what we can do next year. If he starts losing guys in the portal this offseason and he starts losing some of this recruiting class, he might not make it and we lose early to start the next year, I don't think he's going to make it to the end of the year. But I from what I've talked to and the people I've talked to, I would expect Auburn to lose maybe 10 to 15 guys in the transfer portal. Most of those guys are going to be guys that aren't really getting playing time, that have younger guys getting minutes over them. I'm not expecting Auburn to lose any real big-time players on the team right now, and it seems like the recruiting class is going to stay together. I highly doubt Deuce Knight ends up going to Ole Miss.
Yeah, I would really hope not. That would suck big time, because I'm very excited about what he can do for our program. But taking a step outside of Auburn, let's look at the SEC right now. Who do you think, I guess, are the top contenders to make the SEC championship and playoff this year, and why?
Well, I don't know how the tiebreakers are going to work. I know it has something to do with opponent winning percentage, but the one-loss teams right now, and with SEC records, are Texas and Texas A&M, I don't believe, and Tennessee. And I think Tennessee is going to lose this weekend to Georgia, so they'll put them in the 2-loss category. I think Texas A&M, I do think they'll beat Auburn, but I really think that's going to be our Super Bowl this year, if we're being honest. I could see Auburn playing.
I agree.
I could see Auburn playing them a close game, but I think Texas A&M is going to beat Texas in their last game this year, mainly because of that home field advantage, and this game has been played in forever. But honestly, I think I like out of the SEC right now, they might not make the SEC championship game, but if I had to pick a team right now out of the SEC to win the college football playoff, it would be Georgia and Ole Miss, who just played this weekend. I think Ole Miss might even have better talent than Georgia. I think those two teams are the most talented. Texas A&M, I just don't think they have the quarterback play to make a real run in the playoffs. They have a great defense, great offensive line, great running back, and But even Texas is in that category too. I would say Texas, Ole Miss, and Georgia are the three serious teams from the SEC. My current pick overall to win the college football playoff is Ohio State, though.
Okay, I got you. Well, that makes sense. Me looking at the SEC right now, I have a hard time when I think of the best teams. It's really hard for me to differentiate who it is because there's days it looks like it's Alabama, there's days it looks like it's Ole Miss, there's days it looks like it's Texas, Georgia, and I guess you got to throw A&M in there. Even though I think the first four teams I listed, I think they're all better than A&M. It's just that there's A&M's been consistent. To give them credit there. And they've won all the games they should have, but their schedule has been very favorable, very favorable. So yeah, okay. Well, I think we kind of see it in the same way. I don't really know how those tiebreakers work. If I had to say who I think the best team in the SEC is, again, it moves with the blow of the wind. That's hard to say, but I would probably say Ole Miss at this point.
Yeah,
I'd probably say Ole
I
Miss.
I would agree. You kind of have to say that if you think it's Ole Miss or Georgia after this weekend. Obviously, the game was at Ole Miss, but I mean they have the quarterback play. The defensive line has been so impressive this year. They got, especially the receiver play they have as well. Kiffin pulled the strings this year to get a bunch of upperclassmen all throughout the transfer portal and really went all in on this year. They're going to lose most of the team going into next year, so they're going to have to hit the portal again next year very hard. The recruiting class is ranked like 18 or something, so it doesn't seem like he's really trying to build through too much through the high school ranks. I know he's going after Deuce Knight right now, but don't see that as a real possibility. They're not offering him the same amount of NIL that we currently are. And I know Lane Kiffin's totally fine with not getting a high school quarterback. It's Deuce Knight or no high school quarterback for Ole Miss right now. And they'll just go get a couple guys in their portal. That's just how Lane Kiffin's moving in this new era. And Auburn chose to do it a different way. I can't say anyone's doing it the right way, but the results are showing right now that portal method with Colorado and Ole Miss is looking pretty good right now.
Yeah, the Ole Miss fans like to call Lane Kiffin the portal king. And Auburn fans, some of them like to say Hugh Freeze was, but at this point in time, you got to give that title to Lane. I think Hugh's doing a better job, as you said, with the high school recruiting ranks, but that's just going to take more time to build up, unfortunately. But I think it creates a more stable foundation in the future. But speaking of that, let's kind of move, change and start talking about recruiting / transfer portal. A big thing on Auburn fans' minds, and you and I already spoke about this, is the quarterback position. It just hasn't been up to par with what we were, expecting for this year with Peyton Thorne. And there was a lot of talks last offseason about us getting a portal quarterback. I find it very hard to believe we will not target a portal quarterback in this offseason cycle. It's kind of an impossible question to answer because we don't know who's going to be in the portal. I guess you might know. As a matter of fact, I believe you said you announced already that one future player who's going to be hitting the portal on Twitter. But I guess I'll kick it over to you and say, who do you expect? What are three players? Who are three players you expect Auburn to target in the transfer portal this offseason?
All from the quarterback position?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's go quarterback. That's the one that the fans want to know the most.
I'll say this. The quarterback position I'm predicting the quarterback position in this portal will not be quite as talented as the last one. I mean, it's going to be hard to beat Cam Ward, Dylan Gabriel, Riley Leonard. I just don't know if there's that many quarterbacks coming back to college that have that kind of talent. Obviously, I put on my Twitter, I believe Josh Hoover. He's currently third in the nation in passing yards, quarterback for TCU. I believe a lot of the big dogs are going to be going after him. I'm not necessarily sure Auburn's going to go after him. I certainly think he's on the list of guys. I see Josh Hoover being at a playoff school next year, or a big-time SEC school, big-time Big Ten school for sure. Josh Hoover's certainly on there. There's John Mateer from Washington State. I may have butchered that name. I'm sorry if I did. But just watching him work
if you did butcher it, I didn't know it.
Yeah, watching him work the RPO system. I've watched Washington State a few games, and I've looked at his stats. Just heard that he's a guy who's probably going to enter the portal as well, especially with Washington State not being in a Power 4 conference right now. The way he can work the RPS system is just 10 times better than Peyton Thorne. Even though it's Washington State, the guy makes read, he makes quick decisions, makes accurate throws. I think he'd be a great fit in our system. I've heard a lot of people say Caden Salter. I don't really see Auburn going that direction unless we miss on a few guys out of Liberty. And there was one more off the top of my head. I can't think of it right now. But when it comes back to me, I will say it. Who are you thinking?
Yeah, so the first name I was thinking was that last one you said is Caden Salter. And if you would have told me that before this season started, I would have said, sign me up right here, right now. Dude's a stud. I mean, I think he had like 30-something passing touchdowns last year and very few interceptions. He's athletic. He's mobile. I believe Freeze recruited him to Liberty, so he's a Freeze special, you know. But as the season's developed, I'm not as crazy about it. Now, to be fair, I'm not a Liberty football expert. Maybe the offensive line's way worse. Maybe the receivers, maybe they had some great receivers that left. And he will have a great receivers next year at Auburn. I mean, he'll potentially the best receiving class, you know, in the SEC. He'll have whoever Auburn's quarterback next year will have that at his disposal, and a pretty good offensive line at the same time. But anyways, this year, Caden Salter has not, you know, been up to what he was doing last year. He, you know, the Liberty just hasn't been as good overall, and his stats haven't been as good. You know, he was the quarterback and went out and lost to Kennesaw State, gave Kennesaw their first and I believe their only win this season. You know, if Freeze gets him, he's got potential because last year the stats were great. But it would kind of be like remind me a bit of Peyton Thorne if we got him, because Peyton Thorne his first year starting at Michigan State, he killed it. In his second year, he kind of regressed, but you know, we thought, oh, there's some potential there, and it just didn't work out. So that's the big name I've been hearing. Other people I would keep my eye on. First on that list would be Seth Hennigan at Memphis right now. I would love to get him.
Does he have more eligibility?
I think he has one more year. I think
Okay.
he's a senior, but he can, you know, do a grad transfer year or something like that.
If he graduated in 2020, he definitely has that COVID year.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think he has at least a grad transfer, maybe that as well. I'm not sure. But, you know, regardless, I'd love to have him. I mean, he got some mobility, probably slightly less mobile than Peyton Thorne, who's extremely mobile, but he's, you know, a little less mobile than Thorne. But his arm's way better. He's thrown for 1 million passing touchdowns at Memphis, you know, kind of in their air raid offense. Granted, it is an air raid offense, but, you know, he's been super accurate, you know, not a ton of turnovers, and he's passing it a lot. So he would be someone I'd be very excited to have. Another name I'd just keep my eye on would be Chandler Morris over at North Texas. I think he's top 5 in the NCAA right now in total passing yards. Hennigan's top 10, I believe. But, you know, Morris has been killing it at North Texas, but, you know, kind of against lesser talent. Doesn't mean he can't translate and do it well at Auburn with the great weapons we have. But that's another name I would keep my eye on. Now I'm going to kick it to you.
Hey, one more name.
You go for it. Okay.
I remember the name. Billy Edwards from Maryland.
Oh, God.
He torched us in the bowl game with Tua's brother being out. And I believe he's top 10 in the nation in passing yards this year. Hugh Freeze said before he likes to take quarterbacks that he's seen throw in person. I don't know if that really applies to this new portal era, but Billy Edwards Billy Edwards, Josh Hoover, and John Mateer were 3 guys I was told to keep your eye open for.
Okay, yeah, Billy Edwards, you just gave me PTSD on that one because that guy torched us. But now to kind of talk more about high school football recruiting. Before I, 100% go back and kick this back to you, I have a list I'd like to read off to you. Okay?
Okay.
Are you ready? So this is the 2025 State of Alabama recruiting class, or State of Alabama recruiting rankings. And I'm just going to read off the players to you, okay?
Okay.
And who they're committed to. So first is Naeem Offord, currently committed to Ohio State. Second is Jared Smith, committed to Auburn. Third is Malik Autry, committed to Auburn. Fourth is Anquan Fagans, committed to Auburn. Fifth is Eric Winters, committed to Auburn. Sixth is Jacaleb Falk, committed to Auburn. Seventh is Zion Grady, committed to Ohio State. Eighth is Jordan Crawford, committed to Auburn. Ninth is Derek Smith, committed to Auburn. 10th is Antonio Coleman, committed to Auburn. 11 is Andrew Purcell, committed to Kentucky. And then 12th, and I think this guy has the chance to be as good as any of these other guys, Alvin Henderson, a running back, committed to Auburn. Michael, my question to you is: anything missing there? Anything seem missing to you?
Well, you would think the team with the name Alabama would be able to recruit some of the guys from the state of Alabama, but that hasn't been the case so far, and that just shows how much relationships come into play when it comes to recruiting in the state of Alabama. Obviously, Kalen DeBoer took over this past, I believe it was spring when he got the job, and maybe it was the winter. But anyway, didn't come. I don't think he really realized right away what he had to do to be able to recruit in the state of Alabama. Of course, he got Ryan Williams, but Ryan Williams was going to Alabama before he got there. That was a Nick Saban recruit. Hasn't done a great job of recruiting the state now. He has gotten a couple commits in the class of 2027, and I think he did that realizing how much of a mistake he made not recruiting the 2025 guys. But again, those guys are 12 years old. They have plenty of time to change their mind, and we've seen Hugh Freeze flip Antonio Coleman from Alabama, Perry Thompson from Alabama, and Derek Smith from Alabama. And those probably aren't the last three guys we're going to see that with.
Yeah, unfortunately, Michael, that's just one of those things that, we've, for the majority of our life, we've experienced it, that Alabama's just always out-recruited us. We've got players here and there that Alabama wanted, Cam Newton or whatever. But when you have Nick Saban, who people say who's the greatest college football coach of all time, and, I'm kind of flip back and forth on that because he's definitely the best recruiter. Is he the best coach? Probably, but, it's a lot easier to win games when you're recruiting the best players, and Nick Saban is by far the best recruiter of all time in college football. But hopefully, under Hugh Freeze at Auburn, that'll no longer be the case.
That this year with the current recruiting class. They do currently, if you go to the different websites, they're ranked number 2 overall in recruiting right now. If you go through different websites and cherry pick, you can find 5 stars in that class right now. I put in my prediction. Steve Wiltfong over at On3 has put in his prediction for Caleb Cunningham to flip to Ole Miss. So that'll be one they lose. And this recruiting class just isn't what it's been in the past years. And, you're seeing that. Kalen DeBoer had a lot to live up to following after Nick Saban. And, I guess he's done all right so far. What's their record? 7-2, I believe. 7-2.
6-2, 7-2.
But, yeah, going forward, he's going to have to build relationships with these recruits in the state of Alabama. I'm sure at Washington he built some relationships with guys that he currently has in his class, and that may have part to do why he doesn't have any guys from Alabama that are any good in his class right now. But what do you currently have Alabama finishing the season at?
I see Alabama finishing, I hate to say it, but I also love to say it at the same time. I see Alabama finishing 10-2. You and I previously discussed it. It sucks. If Alabama lost a game or two, which they certainly could, they could lose to us or lose to Oklahoma. If they lost one of those, they probably wouldn't make the playoffs. But if they do make the playoffs, it makes their fans way more satisfied with Kalen DeBoer, or as I call him, Husky Harsin. And as you call him, and plenty of people call him, it makes them all happy with them, so it makes them more willing to put up with another year or two of, if you were to fall a little bit, which is what I'm definitely expecting, because, he's done a good job at, Washington, and, people had to say, oh, he was a winner at the Division III, whatever level he's been at, whether it was the girls' Powder Puff football team coach in high school or the Division III ranks where, they're like, oh, this guy just never lost wherever he was. Well, okay, let's see how that works in the SEC, because I have a feeling he's not going to be able to hang with the giants that you see in the SEC with Lane Kiffin, Kirby Smart, Hugh Freeze. I just don't think that Kalen DeBoer has that same pedigree, and I don't think. But he could prove me wrong. We'll see. Now, Michael, I'm going to move over and kind of, unless you have any more football talk to do, I'll let you get it out.
Just my prediction with Alabama.
Okay.
I currently have them finishing 9-3, and I do have them beating Auburn. I do not think they will go into Oklahoma and beat them. I think that's going to be a big upset. I know that is not going to be a popular prediction. I know they'll be favored quite a bit of points that game. I think that's a sneaky one. Going into Oklahoma, an environment that your university no player on that team has ever played at a place I've been to before. I know that it gets pretty loud there. I think they have the talent on that team to beat them. They haven't really been able to pull it together this year. Mm-hmm. But if Jackson Arnold ends up being the QB for that game, I would say watch out.
Yeah. Well, I can see it. I mean, look, I think Alabama's roster is better, as you said, but, I think that Brent Venables is a better coach than Kalen DeBoer. I think you'd probably agree with that as well. I think most people who...
Yeah, maybe not Oklahoma fans,
that.
But...
Yeah, maybe not Oklahoma fans, but as dominant as Venable was at Clemson for so many years, I definitely, I think he'd be able to potentially out-scheme him. And Oklahoma's hung around in a lot of games. That Missouri game, for example, that just happened this past Saturday, that was brutal. But Michael, if you're ready now, I'm gonna pivot over to some college basketball. You ready to roll? Okay. So a bunch of good so far in the Auburn basketball season. A little bit of bad. So let's start with the bad. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. What in the world happened on that plane ride over to Houston, Michael?
I don't know all the details of it. I remember I was at the movie theater when all that stuff really went down, and I checked my phone in the middle of the movie, and I saw that 2 Auburn players had gotten in a fight. I got texted from someone who goes to Auburn still currently that told me it was between... I was hearing 2 stories. One, I was hearing it was between Dylan Cardwell and Chad Baker-Mazara, and that just sounded like a complete lie, that Dylan Cardwell would get in a fight. And then the other I was hearing was Ja'Kai Howard and Turtle Hudson. A lot of people were mad at Ja'Kai Howard, the way he reacted in that first game when Miles Kelly was making all of those threes. I really wouldn't look into that too much. I mean, he's an 18-year-old freshman. He's not going to do everything perfect. I don't really know what that body language was. He certainly didn't seem happy that his teammates were scoring. But I think going forward, I don't think you're going to see that for the rest of the season. But yeah, that had to be maybe a 5th-year senior arguing with a freshman. Who knows what that was over? But yeah, certainly crazy. But it didn't seem to change the score of the game.
Yeah. So that's something I was wondering. And from my perspective, it's all speculation. We know it is Shaheem Hudson and Ja'Kai Howard, but it just makes you think with that attitude he had after the reactions he had, and you were totally right. He's a freshman. He's got to grow. But he acted like an 8-year-old who didn't get, when someone shot the ball. He honestly, not an 8-year-old. He acted like Michael Scott. I believe when Dwight Schrute shot the basketball in that episode of The Office. And Dwight Schrute made the shot, and Michael Scott looked at him and said, Dwight, I was open. That was the exact reaction Ja'Kai Howard had. And you got to think that that's just a poor attitude that's carried over. And in my speculation, he was, I don't know, griping and complaining, I don't know. And Turtle Hudson just said, look, dude, shut up. And it escalated. I mean, again, that's just pure speculation that may not be true. But I'm a little more harsh on Ja'Kai Howard than you. Again, I agree that he's a freshman, and he probably will become more mature and stuff, but he's got to come more mature right now, or else Bruce is going to need to kick him off this basketball team, because you can't have someone who has that attitude. It's a cancer in the locker room.
Yeah, and I don't expect either of those guys to play Wednesday versus Kent State, but hopefully we'll get them back by Maui. Obviously, we're still going to be a good team without them. Obviously, that depth would help a lot, especially Ja'Kai Howard at the 3. But I thought Chris Moore got a lot more playing time, and he clearly stepped up to the plate. So that just shows what kind of depth Bruce Pearl's been able to build with this team.
Yeah, that was the big thing. Of all the scholarship players on the team, if you told me 2 of them were going to be out for a little bit, I'd probably pick these 2. Maybe Chris Moore. You can maybe pick or choose another one. So that worked out well. The thing that it sucks is, from, as you mentioned, a depth perspective. If Chris Moore, or Chad Baker, it don't matter who it is. If a player on our team gets injured, wouldn't
it be funny though if it turned out that it was Janai Broom and Tahad Pettiford that got in the fight, and then they landed the plane, and Bruce Pearl realized he had to suspend 2 players, and so he just picked Turtle Hudson and Ja'Kai Howard and played. That would be funny, but
Yeah, maybe the Chad Baker and Dylan Harwell story is true, but he had those two fall on the sword. So you know what? If that's true, Jakai and Turtle, thank you very much for allowing us to keep them. So yeah. But now to move on into some better news. Let's talk about our basketball games we played. We played 2 games. We played Vermont, and then we played Houston. How you feeling so far, Michael? And feel free to talk about whatever. But how you feeling so far? Yeah.
I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, going into the Vermont game, I thought we might win that by 20 points. I thought that team they were a 13 seed last year, and they returned all 5 starters. I assumed that it would be a pretty close game, and it wasn't. We won by 52, I believe, was the final margin of that game. And then we played Houston, who's a top 5 team, and in my opinion, still should be a top 5 team. It was obviously back and forth the whole game. Janai Broom and Todd Pettiford and Chad Baker Mazzara all stepped up at the real end, and they hit shots when it counted, and we pulled it out.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was looking at. I'm very optimistic about most things that I've seen so far. Vermont, I kind of was with you. I thought we'd win it pretty comfortably, but I thought Vermont's a team that's made it in the NCAA tournament. It feels like they're in it every single year, and I feel like every single year they're like a trendy team to Vermont might take down Duke this year, or there's someone a team that people are picking on their bracket, and they returned everyone, but to just demolish them as if they were a middle school team really goes to show how good we are this year. And then we play Houston, and man, I'm thinking Houston in Houston, we got a real shot to win this one, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be real tough. And to go in there, and we took the lead early, and then for late in the first half, they took the lead, and they held it until pretty late in the second half. And then the way we came storming back with Todd Pettiford just couldn't miss anything, and Janai Broom being Janai Broom, and then having people like Chaney Johnson and Chad Baker step up, it was beautiful. Now, I do want to say one other thing I do want to add, because there were some negatives. There were some turnovers and such, and I hate to be a negative Nancy, but I was talking with some, this past weekend I was on a company retreat talking with, coworkers, and I consider them to be good friends, but we were talking, and they think I'm like this delusional Auburn fan. That's what they're like. Oh, Miles, he's a delusional Auburn fan, and I was saying, Auburn basketball team's the best team in the SEC. And after what I've seen this week, I need to issue them an apology. From what I've seen, we've looked good, but Auburn isn't the best team in the SEC. Auburn's the best team in the country. And so I owe them an apology, because we're number 1 in Ken Palm. Look at our shooting; it's perfect. The funny thing is, they're all Alabama fans, or most of them are Alabama fans, and we basically traded them Aiden Holloway, who's just been a loser, at every level. He was not in high school; he's been a bust in every sense of the word. Aiden Holloway has been a complete bust. He misses 70% of his 3-pointers. He's horrible. We didn't want him on our team anymore. Glad he plays for Alabama, and we replaced him with Todd Pettiford, who, that works with me perfectly well.
Is everything we wanted Aiden Holloway to be,
and everything we thought he would be.
Yeah, Aiden Holloway, he can't play. He just can't play defense. He can't shoot. He can't make a layup. I do think he'll improve this year. Not necessarily because of Nate Oates and over Bruce Broad. Just as a freshman going to a sophomore year, he should shoot a slightly higher percentage. I'm about to check on this Alabama. At the time of recording, the Alabama score is at halftime right now. And you can go ahead and keep talking. I'm just trying to check the score real quick, see what Aiden Holloway's done.
No, you're good. I didn't realize. Yeah, I mean, you know how he does. He'll come out and play really good, probably for 3 non-conference games, and you'll get really excited about it, and then it'll be it'll be a big nothing burger. Aiden Holloway, when he played for Auburn, he looked really good when he was playing the nobodies, and then as soon as we had to step up in competition or played Yale, he did nothing. That I can tell you. And I'm looking at it right now. He's Aiden Holloway at halftime is shooting 0 for 3 on 3-pointers. It's all threes. That's something we've seen that before.
I mean, and he'll probably have like 3 or 4 good games for Alabama, where he looks like he's the next coming of Steph Curry. Last year for us, that was Baylor. His game versus Indiana. He might have had a game or two more, but then he'll have his games versus Kentucky. He was terrible. I mean, he may have only played like 10 minutes that game.
I'm kind of with you, dude. He's think about it. Put yourself in his shoes. He's coming out. He's a 5-star. He's thinking maybe I can go and play really well at Auburn. We were starting him last year to start the season. He's got to be thinking, maybe I go play really well. Maybe I go make the NBA after my first year. Now he's a backup. He's a backup on an inferior SEC team. So he went to a worse team, and then now he's the backup. So congratulations to you, Aiden Holloway. And also, Aiden, congrats on your single-digit win against Arkansas State. You looked really good. Congrats Alabama on that. Y'all look terrific.
What I've gathered from Alabama fans this year is Arkansas State is going to win their conference. McNeese State, who they're playing right now, is going to win their conference. The team McNeese State just lost to is going to win their conference. And Vermont is not going to win their conference. It has nothing to do with Alabama being just a little bit overrated. It's all these teams are playing are just going to win their conference. That's what it is.
And it's not that Alabama's a bad team, dude. I mean, we've seen, but what they're doing to Alabama, we've seen in previous years. A team that got hot, a solid team. Alabama was a good team last year that got hot at the right time, made a run to the Final Four. Now people think they're going to be great. I mean, just think about it. Last year, this happened with FAU. They got hot, made it to the Final Four. 2 years ago, they did that. And last year, everyone hyped them up, and then they were good, but they weren't as good. And the year before that, it happened to North Carolina, where North Carolina was an 8 seed, made a run in the NCAA tournament, made the championship game. People hyped them up, had them ranked number 1 the next season. And then just a few weeks into the season, they're outside the top 25. So, not saying that's going to happen to Alabama, but definitely Alabama's being overhyped right now. There's no question about it. I think after what we've seen so far this in the SEC, I think the top 2 teams, number 1 has to be Auburn. I think number 2 has to be Tennessee, because going on the road and beating Louisville. I mean, seriously, Louisville is much improved. It was a hostile environment, and Tennessee just went in there and killed them. You're going to see, I'm telling you, you're going to see some good teams in the ACC go to Louisville and not come out with a win. So for Tennessee to go and do that, definitely to me solidified them as number 2 in the SEC right now. Alabama's probably
I got 3. Auburn at 1, Alabama at 2, Tennessee at 3. I really like Texas A&M before this year. They picked up a loss at UCF. Granted, that's a tough environment to go into for your first game. I still think they'll be very good this year. I really was expecting a lot more out of Georgia and Ole Miss. Both of them barely. I know Ole Miss played Grambling State and won by 2, and they're still ranked right now. But
yeah,
Grambling State's not supposed to be a very good team. They're bottom 50 in KenPom right now. I forget who Georgia.
Yeah, I saw
Georgia
that the other day
had a similar
too.
game. I expected more out of them. They do have Asa Newell, who will be a top 10 pick on their team, but of course we've seen that before with Georgia. Anthony Edwards is still on a good team. Expect them to be better than last year. Florida, another team to watch out for. Walter Clayton's obviously back.
The coaching troubles over there might impact it, but they got a very talented roster. I'm kind of with you on what was it, Ole Miss. They disappointed me the other day. LSU, they put Alabama State the other night, and I didn't think super highly of LSU, but now I think even less of them because they were losing pretty significantly. I think in the second half, early on, to Alabama State, and had to come storming back to win it.
Arkansas lost it.
And then another one. Yeah, I was at Arkansas to Baylor. I was kind of higher on Arkansas, probably a little higher than you were before the season started, and they haven't looked great. And then the other one that's really shocked me, a team that I expected to regress, but not like this, was South Carolina losing to North Florida. I think South Carolina might be the worst team in the SEC.
The best thing that happened yesterday for South Carolina fans was that North Florida went to Georgia Tech and beat them by, I believe, 15 to 20 points range. And so... So North Florida is going to be a team to watch out for this year. Obviously, if Auburn played North Florida, or Alabama, or Tennessee played North Florida, I think those three would throttle them. But definitely a mid-major to watch up.
Well, I'm not sure Alabama would. Alabama would. They'd probably beat them by single digits like they did Arkansas State.
Arkansas State, I do think that's going to be a decent team this year. Their assistant, one of Nate Oates' former assistants coach was their head coach at Arkansas State.
Brian Hodgson or something like that.
So we'll see.
Yeah, and I guess to close out the podcast, Michael, one other thing I want to throw at you is you are in Bruce Pearl's shoes, okay? Who do you have as the starting five going into the next game? And on top of that, what do you expect Auburn to do in this coming week? They have their next game. The game that they had this week is going to be against Kent State. What starting five are you wanting to see if you could make the call? And how do you expect the game against Kent State to go?
I think it's pretty obvious who the starting five should be. Going to the season, Bruce Pearl said Tahad Pettiford was mostly going to play the 2. After that Houston game, he played a lot of the point guard, and I think going forward he has to be the point guard. I don't think they'll do it right away. I think they'll keep J.P. McGee starting the game. Bruce Pearl's always been kind of weird with the starting lineups, but if it was me, Tahad Pettiford at the 1, Denver Jones at the 2, Chad Baker-Mazar at the 3, Chaney Johnson at the 4, and Janai Broom at the 5. I don't think there's really any point of trying that Janai Dylan Cardwell lineup. It's all right, but Chaney Johnson's worked his way, and Tahad Pettiford have both worked their way into the starting lineup so far, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I largely agree with you. The point guard to me is the hardest position to kind of figure out. Because, J.P. Pegues was so good at Furman, and he's been solid for us so far. He hasn't been spectacular. He's been solid. But he's also older, more experienced, whereas Tahad Pettiford doesn't have it. Now, granted, he looked phenomenal against Houston, but you got to think that was probably, being a freshman, he ain't going to play like that every single game. So I probably slightly lean towards J.P. Pegues being our starter, but I certainly get Tahad Pettiford and wouldn't be mad about it one bit. He's earned it after that Houston game. And then I actually would probably agree with every other bit of it you said. Although I'm fine with them starting Broom and Cardwell. To me, it really kind of feels like they're doing it to kind of as a tip of the cap to Cardwell, given that he's, Mr. Auburn, been here for forever. He's a starting caliber center, but he's decided to stay at Auburn and play behind the best big man in, college basketball that we've seen in a long time, honestly, in college basketball. And so to kind of let him start and then, 2-3 minutes into the game, I feel like they sub him out and they, run Janai at the 5, and then they kind of, have the 2 going back and forth from there on out. But I agree. And then for the Kent State game, I expect a total pounding. They're a MAC team. They're solid. They're a team that feels like they go into the NCAA tournament very commonly, but why would we expect anything different?
So I'd like to end this podcast with 3 predictions, if that's all right.
Wow. Yeah. We got one earlier.
Well, one of them is the one from earlier. Just trying to clarify. Caden Magwood, top 50 point guard out of Charlotte, North Carolina. We're going to have him commit on Tuesday of this week. Now, we got another basketball commit. Sebastian Williams Adams. Okay. I don't want to butcher that name, just had to read it. He is also going to commit. He will be committing on Sunday, November 17th. And we will also be getting Shamar Arnaud, a cornerback currently committed to USC. He will flip. I'm not sure exactly what day he's flipping, but I would expect that this week, maybe next week, but I expect that to happen within the next few days as well.
Okay. Well, that's exciting. 3 for the price of 1 right there, ladies
next
and gentlemen.
Week I'll be able to come back with some more. And we'll review all 3 of these predictions next Sunday night when we record.
Yeah, we'll quiz you on those earlier to make sure. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining us on our very first edition of Auburn Anonymous. Please follow, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We're going to be pushing out content to y'all weekly. We appreciate it, and y'all have a good rest of y'all's days.
Appreciate everyone for watching, and War Dam.
Yeah, War Dam. Thank you, everyone.